Hello, welcome to my very first Facebook Live. I'd be lying if I didn't say I was using some of my own techniques on myself earlier on today. As a trainer and coach, I'm going to treat it similar to one of those sessions. So in good old-fashioned style, I've got some notes to keep me on track and make sure that I stay focused on doing the best job for you. I thought I'd start just by introducing myself. For those of you that don't know me, I'm an executive coach and trainer. I've been running my own business for the last 14 years. The business is called Be, and I work as a traditional coach, but also I tend to work in quite an unusual way, and I'm going to be sharing one of those ways with you today. I've also just recently written a book called Inner Brilliance, Outer Shine, which will hopefully be published later on this year. My intention today, originally I was going to do a Facebook Live with Ben Brain, who isn't here tonight, but we're going to do this Facebook Live sometime in the future. And the idea was, Ben and I have been on a podcast together called The Truth About Business, and he was going to interview me around some of the topics that are in my book, which is imposter syndrome and overworking. And with everything that's going on with the coronavirus, I just felt it wasn't appropriate. People are not interested in shining, you know, they've got far more worrying things on the mind. So this is kind of my gift to my community, to my friends. I just thought, I've got skills I can use, so why not share? The other thing is that havening is that straightforward to use, that I'm hoping that you'll be able to share it with your own community, with your own family and friends. Once you know how to use this technique, feel free to share it. I am following along with slides, and I will make my slides available. If you drop me an email, I can send you my slides after the event. And my video, of course, will be available on my Facebook page once we're done here. So in terms of what I'm going to be covering with you tonight, we're going to cover safety first, then I'm going to be sharing with you what having actually is, but also how does it work. And then I'm going to get you to reflect. There will be a moment this evening where we focus on what your worries are, what your concerns are, and it might be useful for you to have a pad and a pen when we do that reflection, because unless we get to root cause, how can we resolve it? Then we'll get onto the live havening slot. Quite a lot of different havening techniques, but I'm going to share something called transpirational havening with you tonight. And then we're going to close this evening with something pleasant. I want to kind of send you all off in a positive frame of mind. So in terms of staying safe, the first thing is you might need to wash your hands. I've got my hand gel here. The reason being is that we use our hands for havening, and that will become apparent once we get into the technique. But as part of the technique, so traditionally, and I've already washed my hands, we would stroke the face. So that is part of the technique. But because of Corona and everything else, obviously it's not, we're being advised not to touch our face. So we're going to kind of skip that aspect of the technique, but I'll explain that a little bit later on. For obvious reasons, it makes sense not to operate machinery as we're doing this, but also because havening is really relaxing and calming, and you're going to be producing delta waves, which we normally experience in deep healing sleep. You need to make sure you're alert enough afterwards once we're done. So you might need to get yourself a little espresso afterwards. Again, as you're using the technique, if you start to yawn or anything like that, we can't see you, so that's fine, yawn away. The final point to mention is that, you know, for really traumatic events, what we don't want to do, we want to keep things nice and light tonight, and we're going to be focusing primarily on the coronavirus. Havening, when I start to explain why it was invented, where it's from, you can use havening for really traumatic events, but I would always recommend that you use a havening practitioner like me, or you can find a havening practitioner online at havening.org, and there's loads of havening practitioners all around the world, and they can help you with that sort of thing. So that's kind of the staying safe. Let's move on to what havening actually is. So when I qualified as a coach, which was about 16 years ago, you train as a coach, In the early days, I got quite frustrated because I'd be working with a client and we'd agree this fantastic strategy. You know, we'd look at what's position A is, what's the issue, what's position B, what does the client want instead. The coaching piece was how do we get from A to B. I'd elicit this plan from the client, they'd go off into the sunset, and then they'd come back the following session having done nothing. I can tell that there's inner stuff in the way of outer stuff, so in other words, action, behaviour change. I went off, I became an NLP practitioner, master practitioner, a trainer of NLP, a hypnotherapist, integral eye movement therapist, EFT, so that's emotional freedom technique, and then I found havening. And for me, havening has made the biggest difference, not only personally in my own life, with my family's life, but also with my clients. And I am a real skeptic in terms of techniques, but if something works for me personally, I am then prepared to use it with my clients. So in terms of what havening is, it's referred to as a psychosensory technique, which means that basically it uses touch, which involves stroking your hands. That's one method that you could use. And what they discovered when they were identifying which techniques work, because I'll be talking about the inventor. So havening was invented by a doctor of neuroscience, a gentleman called Dr. Ronald Rudin, and also developed by his brother Stephen Rudin, who is a dentist. Ron Rudin was interested in all of because there are all of these psychosensory therapies that are out there, and he was interested in what actually worked. And he first got interested in something called thought field therapy, where you tap on certain points and you think certain things. And he couldn't understand that by touching certain parts of the body and thinking certain things, how people would miraculously get over, deep-rooted fears. So the guy who invented thought field therapy, a guy called Roger Callahan, he cured somebody who had a phobia of water. So imagine how difficult that must have been, having a fear of water, and just by tapping on certain points, she was able to dive into the water. And Ron Rudin was fascinated by that, because havening is still getting out in the public domain, and you may have seen that Paul McKenna is one of our advocates. And when Ron was doing his research, he discovered that when you rub your hands, we produce 5 times the amount of serotonin than we would normally. If you rub from shoulder to elbow, between 5 and 38 times the amount of serotonin. And if you rub your face, you produce 90 times the amount of serotonin. But I'll explain again how that's used a little bit later on. So the idea is you use the havening touch whilst thinking about a distressing thought, memory, or a feeling. And we're going to be focusing primarily on distressing thoughts about the coronavirus. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we don't want to be dealing with real deep-seated childhood trauma today. So whilst havening was invented to deal with deep-seated trauma, I would always recommend that you, as I said earlier, just seek out a qualified havening practitioner. So let's move on to how it actually works. So there are a variety of different techniques. When I'm working with our clients, I work primarily with event havening. So often a client will come to me, and back to coaching in a traditional sense. So position A will be, these are all the things I want to overcome, and this is how I want to be instead. And as I said, in the olden days, traditionally, you would elicit a plan that would get you from A to B. But the challenge with that is that sometimes inner stuff gets in the way of outer stuff, so our actions and our behaviours. And with event havening, so take for example, if you've got an unwanted feeling, emotion or behaviour, which often is the kind of stuff that comes into my coaching, my clients sit there in that coaching chair. So take for example, if you've got a brusque communicator, the way that havening works is I would listen into the language and make copious notes actually, tune into the specific language, and often there are limiting beliefs laced and connected with limiting behaviour. And then I will say to the client, can you think of a time in the past when, and then I'll fire the language back at them. So let's say a client is brusque or rude or inappropriate during board meetings, and this is as a result of, so they are triggered into that state, into that behaviour, as a result of other people being taken advantage. So if that's the key language, another person being taken advantage, that's then what I would say back to the client. So can you think of a time in the past when another person was taken advantage? And where we go, when it comes to working, where we go is we go, you may have heard of the nature versus nurture theory of personality. You can probably see in the background, I have got my relatives up on the wall. There's my mum there and there's my nana, and you can't see him, but my granddad on the wall as well. And so there are certain traits that are carried through the family line and contained in our DNA. So take for example, my granddad, he loved horses and he used to have his own boat, and funnily enough, those things have followed into my life as well. And sadly he died when I was young, so it wasn't a case of nurturing those things into me. Some things are just encoded in our DNA. Then the nurture aspect of our personality, so between the ages of 0 and 21, the most significant time is age 0 to 7, and we refer to this as the imprint period. And during that time we are picking up the ways of the world, our beliefs about ourselves, so how competent, how capable we are, how loved, how liked, how cherished we are. All of those things are laid down in that first 7 years. Sometimes we can be triggered. So for example, the coronavirus might have triggered something in you that relates to your past, in which case event havening will be appropriate for that. Now I'm going to be sharing a link with you after this event so that you know how to do event havening as well, because tonight we're going to focus on another type of havening called transpirational, which I'll come on to in a minute. But in essence, the way that havening works is you go back to the event, age 0 to 7. So let's say, going back to the example I used earlier, this person is brusque during meetings when they feel that another person is being taken advantage of. So you use the language, can you think of a time in the past when somebody was taken advantage of? And I would say, ideally, age 0 to 7. 9 times out of 10, a memory will pop up in the client's mind. And then what we do is we use havening to get rid of it. And these memories, when we're getting rid of unwanted behaviours, beliefs, emotions, the memories that we're getting rid of are often negative. And literally, all you do is you think about the memory. As you think about the memory, it is live for 7 minutes, and that neural pathway is live for 7 minutes. This is a slight techie bit, so apologies. So as that memory is live, you've got some receptors that come out on the postsynaptic neuron. These receptors are the things that are responsible for generating our feelings. And if we work on the premise that feelings drive our behaviour, if we get rid of the feeling, then we get rid of the behaviour. And this is where havening can feel a bit like cheating. So the client thinks about the memory, they're rubbing their hands, rubbing their face, or rubbing their arms. That neural pathway is live for 7 minutes, the receptors come out, and then over time, and we score the memory as well in terms of negativity. So 10 is the strongest negative feeling you can have, 0 is I'm not bothered about this. So they rub their hands, do this for 7 minutes, and we keep rescoring the memory, and what you'll notice is that the score comes down, and when it gets to 0 it means that the memory has been dealt with. And what's happened to those receptors is that they have retracted, but they've permanently retracted. So the neural pathway is still there, it just doesn't work anymore. So you're just not generating the feeling, and that's why it's great for things like phobias, for post-traumatic stress disorder, but I tend to use it in business where somebody's got a limited, so they tend to be smaller traumas. So in the havening community we talk about big trauma and little trauma. They tend to be smaller traumas that we're dealing with, but equally they can have a devastating effect on how we feel, how we behave, and what we believe about ourselves at work. There are some other havening techniques, something called informational havening, then there's something called talk havening and outcome havening. So you can positively program yourself with an outcome using havening as well. Tonight, as I've mentioned, we're going to be covering transpirational havening. I'm going to give you the protocol for transpirational havening. We're not going to do it just yet, but I want to explain how to do it first before we start to deal with your coronavirus related concerns and worries. So the first step is to identify the feeling. So for example, you might be feeling panicky about not being able to, for example, we always get our shopping delivered by Ocado. Husband came up this morning and he said, oh, they're stopping deliveries. So my first instinct was, right, okay, well, I'll book a delivery with someone else. Went on to Sainsbury's, no slots. Went on to Tesco, could only get a slot in 2 weeks' time. That made me feel a bit uncomfortable. So you identify the feeling, that's the first step. Then you score the feeling out of 10. 10 is the strongest negative feeling. Now this is what I would suggest you do with this is that you always take your gut feeling instinct. This will be your first measure of the intensity of the feeling. What we want to do is we want to get that down to 0. And then what we do is we chant, we focus on the feeling. So let's say, so this afternoon when I was doing it, I was saying nervous, 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 nervous. And what we're doing as we're saying that is we're drawing up the feeling. And the reason it's called transpirational havening is that a tree draws up its nutrients, its water, and then it transpires out through the leaves, out through the top of the tree, so it releases stuff. In the same way with havening, we are drawing up our feeling and then releasing it. And some people find it useful to, if a feeling isn't shifting, to use that as a metaphor. So to imagine drawing up the feeling and then releasing it whilst you're using the havening touch. So we chant, we focus, so nervous, 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 nervous. Now the interesting thing about feelings is that, I always describe it can be a bit like onion skin layers, in that we can get rid of one feeling, so feeling nervous, and then it might change into apprehensive. So then you would continue apprehensive, apprehensive, apprehensive. And you continue the havening touch until the word changes or your state changes. So when you get a sense of that negative feeling has been reduced to 0. And you just keep cycling through those steps until, as I say, you just feel neutral and you've moved on from the feeling. So this is the moment where you consider what your coronavirus worries. It could be worth you getting a pen and paper. And so my questions to you are, so to think about how you feel about the coronavirus. What are your concerns or fears? You know, some people might be afraid of being alone through self-isolation. You know, going back to event havening, that could have connections in your childhood. It could be a trigger from your childhood that's been reproduced. And if that's the case, then what I would suggest is you use event havening. If you know what those events are, then you would haven the connected events related to being alone as well. It could be that you're afraid of getting sick, or you're afraid of a loved one getting sick, or not being able to pay the bills. I mean, what was interesting about this whole corona thing is that when it started out, initially, so we were supposed to be going, I was taking to my husband to go and see The Who, so that was the first thing that got cancelled. Then I had an event for 100 people that got cancelled. Then another event got cancelled. Then several coaching sessions got cancelled. And what's interesting, so the panic started to rise a little bit. But I've used my techniques and I've managed to keep myself calm to the point where I feel like, control what you can control and let go of the stuff that you can't. So just take a moment to reflect and think about what are the things that you're concerned about. So just make a note. Let's begin. So start by rubbing your hands like that, or you could rub shoulder to elbow. Remembering right now we're not going to use the face movement because of coronavirus concerns. So what we want to do is we want to get the delta waves going, serotonin going, flowing around your body. And as you look at that list, I want you to pick the most emotionally charged word. So which word leaps off the page? What's your biggest concern in relation to the coronavirus? And then when you've spotted that, I want you to score it out of 10. So 10 is the strongest negative emotion. So score it out of 10. And now focus on that word. So if you get bored of doing that, you can do that one. And start to chant this feeling. So for example, it might be scared. So you would say scared, scared. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to allow you to do this until the end of the track, and then I'm going to check in with you and see how you're doing. So you keep chanting that feeling, whatever that feeling happens to be. And if it changes into something else, so you get your next onion skin layer, focus on that. you doing? How was havening for you? What was your experience like? Feel free to put something in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you felt. Or you can drop me an email if you want to later on. Estelle@b, spelt with 3 E's, .company. So going forward, the way you would continue to use this technique, you would continue, as I mentioned earlier, keep unpeeling the onion skin layers. So let's say fear turned to apprehension, and perhaps apprehension then turned to irritation or something like that. And you just keep going until you think, no, actually my state's changed, the feeling has gone, so it's transpired out of you and you're feeling better. Now, the other thing to mention as well is that sometimes when we do use that technique, that we can start to bring in connected events. Now, if that's the case, you can use event havening. As I mentioned, if you want to drop me an email, I can send you the notes from this presentation, but also the link to the event havening video. It's only 2 minutes long. So, in terms of going forward with this, it is really easy, isn't it? Literally, rub your arms, think about how you feel. Do it until the feeling dissipates. To close this session, I wanted to leave you with something positive and to use havening in a positive way. And throughout your life, I'm sure there's been some best bits. So it might have been an amazing holiday on a beautiful beach, or it might have been a professional achievement, some kind of an award. Or it could be a family memory, or it could be a memory with friends, or maybe even a personal accomplishment, so maybe you've climbed a mountain or something like that. But the point being that we all have best bits, don't we, in our life, bits that make us feel amazing, elated, happy, joyful. The reason I'm doing this activity with you is that, and it's only very quick, we've only got a few minutes left, is to prove that the mind is a really malleable thing. And you know, the vlog posts that I've been doing over the last few days, the point being of that stuff is it depends where we focus our attention. Are we going to focus our attention on the negativity and the hype? Yes, keep yourself informed, but equally, you know, what about focusing on or filling your mind with good stuff? And that's what we're going to do in a minute. So when you're ready, continue the havening touch. You can stroke your arms or you can stroke your hands. And then I'd like you to close your eyes just for a minute. And as you close your eyes, feeling connected with your feet to the ground, being supported by your chair or whatever you happen to be sitting on, listening to my voice. And as you begin to reflect and consider, what are some of the best moments of your life? And it could be any moment, a moment that's unique to you. And as you consider the best moments of your life, and you continue that havening touch, allow yourself to really get a waft of that best moment. Really go there and notice whether it's in colour or is it in black and white. Is it a movie or is it still? And can you see yourself in it, or are you looking out of your own eyes? If you can see yourself in it, try stepping into it, try really being there, because this will help you to access those great feelings. Now tuning into what you can hear in this best moment of yours, and listening in for whether the sounds that you can hear, is it in your left ear or is it your right ear? Or is it actually surround sound? Tuning into the volume, is it high, low, is it medium volume? And now tapping into the feeling that feeling? Where does it start? And tapping into whether that feeling, whether it has a colour, whether it has a temperature or a shape. Tapping into whether that feeling moves at all. Does it start somewhere and expand and grow throughout the rest of your body, or is it static? And then when you're ready, just allow that best bit, that best moment, and all the associated feelings with that best moment to expand and grow and flow around your body. Really get a good waft of it. Make it the best it can be as you continue to rub your hands over from shoulder to elbow. And as you do this, allow yourself to notice how malleable the brain is and how quickly we can change our state of mind, and what positive effect that can have on us in terms of the results that we're getting and how it impacts on our behaviour. And you can do this at any time. Simply access your best bits. So taking a deep breath in, opening your eyes, you can stop the havening touch, or you can continue if you like, you can keep going. Thank you so much for watching. Wishing you well, stay safe, stay calm, and look after yourselves. All right, take care. Bye.